My friends, here we have a Russian group going on an offense against Ukrainian positions, but they forgot a little small detail. Well, not so small anymore if you know what it is. We're gonna scroll through the video because I cannot actually show the full video. Everything clear on the right. Repeat, clear on the right. They're talking on the radio. Ukrainian lines are only 500 meters ahead. This used to be a windbreak or a forest belt with 3-4 rows of trees. It's all gone, like First World War, moon surface, bombarded to oblivion. Now it went dark and they're ready to go. Let's go, covering, move out. Russians are moving out. And now, my friends, we listen while the Ukrainians deliver their presence to the Russian offensive unit. Clusters. Do you hear it? That is it. That is it. That's what makes infantry assaults pretty much impossible to achieve any kind of notable gains because cluster munitions are so damn effective. You could hear it. Let's listen to it again. Damn! Woo! That is insane. Now the entire unit immediately went to the ground, covered their heads, everything they do, all of the drills to make them safe. But under cluster munitions, there's such a heavy cloud of shrapnel. Listen to it. And wounded. We have the first wounded. Let's get out. I can walk. Let's get out. Let's go. Run. And boom. Another wounded. I'm wounded too. 300 means 300 in Russian, what they're talking about. It's a code for wounded. 200 is KIA. So the cluster munitions hit immediately 2 wounded, which had to be carried by 3 or 4 guys. So this attack has taken out 6 guys away from the battle. If they use the squad, the entire squad is unfit for battle. If they use the platoon, half of the platoon is pretty much unfit for battle. I wanted to share this to illustrate what's the tough reality of being under cluster munitions, because Russians have been using these since day one of the war. Ukrainians have been using this only for 3 months now. So the difference is pretty big. Tatarigami, the Twitter account, has once again published a thread about Avdiivka, and so much is happening there. I'm going to read you the thread so all of you, you and me, will be on the same page with the information. These red dots signify knocked out cold Russian armored vehicles. Let's see what Tatarigami writes. The situation remains difficult with ongoing Russian pressure on both the flanks and the town of Avdiivka itself. While neither side holds complete control over the waste heap, Russian forces have managed to achieve access to it and can make occasional temporary use of this position. See, this, my friends, is the waste heap, the Terrikon. For some reasons, Russians are fixated on it. It's a very tough position to actually occupy because Ukrainian drones are up above, their artillery missions are shot into the coordinates of the waste heap, and they have firing sectors on almost 3 sides covering this waste heap. So for the Russians to take it, it is possible, but it's very loss heavy, and this is what we have been seeing. Russian forces have been heavily utilizing airdrop bombs and guided airdrop bombs, resulting in significant damage to structures within Avdiivka, including civilian infrastructure. Satellite imagery shows a concentration of heavy artillery shelling to the north of Avdiivka in close proximity to the heap, suggesting sustained pressure on defenders. If we analyze this ground for a moment, we can see it's pretty much a moon surface. It's bombarded to bits. All of these small holes are artillery shell holes actually, and they are everywhere. Usually when looking at these satellite photos, you can see heavy artillery usage where you cannot see the windbreaks anymore. Here we can see there are greenery left, so there's some more room. In Bakhmut, for example, all of the windbreaks blown to oblivion. You don't see them from space anymore. Despite Russian denials, mounting losses are becoming increasingly evident. These losses have been corroborated by drone footage, geolocation efforts by volunteers, and satellite imagery. In this specific area to the west of Krasnohorivka, for instance, 16 Russian vehicles were destroyed, damaged, or abandoned. To sum up, the duration of the enemy's intent and ability to sustain these high-pressure assaults remains uncertain, despite notable losses in personnel and equipment. Reports suggest a decrease in the number of vehicles employed in assaults, yet the persisting shelling and assault raise concerns. Russians appear to be making small but incremental progress towards Stepove, even in the face of significant losses in vehicles and personnel. This advancement could potentially create a dangerous situation, as a foothold in Stepove may enable them to sever remaining logistical routes to Avdiivka. Russians are using the only tactic that has ever proven any kind of success to them, the same tactic that they used to take Bakhmut: insane losses for minor gains. But if you repeat that every day, and if you don't run out of men or armored personnel vehicles, you might take the settlement, you might take the city. And these tactics immediately reflect in the Russian losses chart of the past 24 hours. We have 810 men knocked out cold, 29 tanks, 18 armored personnel vehicles, 30 artillery systems, 33 vehicles and fuel tanks, and 3 special equipment. My friends, this is my latest fundraiser for Ukrainian Special Forces Kamikaze drones, Artur Rehi birds. Let's see how much you have donated. 45,000, but we need 53 for 1 truck and 30 Kamikaze drones. Now, I have seen these drones, touched them, flown around with them. They are amazing. They're very fast, light and agile. They cost $700 a piece, and they can destroy Ural trucks or personnel. For example, on the Russian losses charts, vehicles and fuel tanks, these losses can be done with these drones. They can also destroy equipment on top of armored personnel carriers. We're lacking 8,000 right now, so let's reach the goal together. Click the link in the description below, watch the documentary, donate. Let's get 53,000. I will make a separate video for you of giving these drones directly to the unit. Also, if you want more information and more footage about stuff like this, head on to my Instagram, link is in the description below. I'll see you there. My friends, do you see this distance? This is 150 kilometers. Now let's zoom into Berdyansk for a moment. Berdyansk right here, 125 kilometers from the front, and this is where Russians lost the biggest losses of single day for Russian aviation in this war. They lost 9 choppers in this airfield, and now we have reports coming from Russia and from Ukraine that Russians have started moving all of their aviation assets further than 150 kilometers from the front, due to Ukraine receiving United States long-range Atacms, as you said, I should pronounce it, long-range Atacms, which have the range of 150 kilometers, and they are also clusters. Now this means all of southern occupied Ukraine, none of these airfields can host a significant portion of choppers or planes anymore, because simply Ukraine will strike them down with incredibly precise Atacms given by United States. What does this really mean for Ukraine? Well, if you have to move all of your choppers and planes to Crimea or to Russia away from occupied Ukraine, that means they can still be used for frontline bombing, for example the Ka-52, but the fact is Ukrainians have powerful radars. They will always know when a Russian plane or a chopper lifts off. What was the issue now is that these choppers and planes were quite close to the front lines, and Ukrainians only got a minute or 2 warning. Now, since they have to be 150 kilometers away, Ukrainians have an early warning possibility, meaning they can take cover or move their armored vehicles away from any danger, which will save Ukrainian lives and armored vehicles equipment directly. So this is how long-range Atacms change the battlefield. Now, my friends, we will watch the Russian biggest military blogger, Sergei Shoigu, the defense minister, claim how they shot down 21 Ukrainian planes in the last 5 days. Check this out. Shot down 24 planes actually, not 21 but 24. In 5 days. And look at these guys, these 3 Ivans are listening to him like, oh, tell me more, how powerful we are. I like listening to you, Comrade Commissar. And Shoigu is like, 5 days, 24 planes, we are the best. In 5 days, look at this. It's like a cartoon. Shoigu's expression is like, I did not make this up. It's really 5 days, 24 planes. Okay, for S's and giggles, I will read you the list of the Russian Ministry of Defense official list of which Ukrainian aviation assets they destroyed in the past week. October 19th, the Russians supposedly shot down 2 Ukrainian aircraft, 2 helicopters. October 20th, 10 Ukrainian MiG-29s and 2 Su-25s. 10 Ukrainian MiG-29s in 1 day. I mean, the Russians claimed 2 months into this war that all entire Ukrainian Air Force is destroyed. Well, now, 1.5 years later, they are still claiming to have been shooting down Ukrainian planes in such quantities that the Ukrainian Air Force would have needed thousands of planes to keep up with the Russian Ministry of Defense losses quantities. 20th of October continues, also 2 Mi-8 helicopters. 21st of October, supposedly the Russians shot down 4 aircraft, 3 helicopters. 22nd of October, supposedly they shot down 3 MiG-29s, 1 Su-25, and 24th of October, 2 MiG-29s and 1 L-39. Damn it, wow, the Russian anti-air capabilities must be on fire. Now this is all of course made up. I just wanted to give some humor to your day, so I read it. Ukrainian officials and Zelensky reported that 2 days ago, Russian drone attack targeted Ukrainian nuclear power plant in Kelminsky region. Ukrainian president reported that in this kind of attacks, Ukraine will retaliate against Russian electrical infrastructure, the same way Russia is attacking Ukrainian infrastructure. Now, the difference between winter of 2022, where Russia bombarded heavily Ukrainian civilian infrastructure, making Ukrainians live in cold and darkness throughout the winter. The difference between that winter and this winter is that Ukraine now has capabilities which are 100%, 200% more powerful than they had in 2022. And they have their own drones production and missiles production in the country, able to damage and retaliate for these attacks. They can actually strike back on Russian electrical infrastructure. But Russians love this kind of connections. Recently, their nuclear exercises began, and this is why they targeted the Ukrainian nuclear power plant. On this footage, you can see the launch of the Yaroslav intercontinental ballistic missile from the Plazetsk Cosmodrome at the Kura test site, and the Sineva ballistic missiles from the Tula nuclear-powered missile submarine from Barents Sea. Also, they show the takeoff of the Tupolev 95 MS, so the modernized version. It's a strategic missile carrier, a nuclear carrier, the only nuclear carrier platform Russia has, and it is ancient. Yes, Russia also has intercontinental ballistic missiles, but mostly it still relies on the Tupolev 95, which is an aircraft from the year 1956. And by the way, an interesting fact about the Tu-95 that Russia uses almost daily to bombard Ukrainian cities with missiles, it is the loudest aircraft in the world because it has open system rotor blades not covered, and the tips of these rotor blades move faster than the speed of sound, creating an insane amount of noise. As I mentioned, the Tu-95 entered service within the Soviet Air Force in 1956, but it was only used in first combat in 2015, so the Soviets had never used it in combat. In 2015, it was used in Syria to bombard Syrian cities. Russians themselves are expecting this aircraft to serve in their aerospace forces up to 2040. So this plane was commissioned 1956 and it almost serves to 2050. So let's say 90 years. So this plane will be a very strong pensioner when it is allowed to retire. By this time it's almost 90 years old, and we can see Russians not maintaining their planes and them falling out of the sky. Well, this plane is no different. The United States counterpart of Tupolev 95 is a B-52. Now imagine if the United States wouldn't have the B-1 or B-21 bombers now. They would have the B-52. Well, this is the Russian situation. That's what they are using. If you're from the US, connected to the military, you know how crazy this sounds when I say to you that the United States should rely mostly on B-52 to carry its nuclear forces, to carry the nuclear warheads. That just sounds so wrong. That's the Russian situation. Now we go to Asia, actually, where North Korea is supplying a heavy amount of artillery shells and weapons to Russia. This statement was reported by the United States, Japan, and South Korea. It was made in a joint statement that North Korea is supplying weapons and ammunition to Russia. It is not a rumor anymore, it is now confirmed. And we're not talking about a small amount of weapons. North Korea has an insane weapons stockpile. Yes, they are old, they're not modernized, but this is what Russia needs because that's all they can use. Their tactics rely on these mass-produced old weapon systems. Unfortunately, this allows them to make such suicidal mass attacks on Avdiivka. A few days ago, the joint forces of the United States, Japan, and South Korea also made their first joint military exercise together to deter Chinese and North Korean influence in the area. And now we jump back to Ukraine, because the Ukrainian armed forces have announced the creation of a new battalion where only Russian citizens can join. Now this battalion is different because they already have the Svoboda Rossiya, or Russian Freedom Legion, but the difference is that Russian Freedom Legion is not under the armed forces of Ukraine. It's a volunteer battalion, volunteer unit. The Ukrainian army battalion for Russians, it is called Sibir. And this is fully under the control and orders of the armed forces of Ukraine. And they will use minorities from Russia who are in Ukraine and want to liberate Russia from the yoke of Putin. These will be in Sibir, working under the armed forces of Ukraine. And when this war is closing next year or year after that, these battalions will be very important, because then things will start happening in Russia. And there's a difference if it is Russian citizens fighting in Russia against a dictator, or if it's Ukrainian armed forces fighting in Russia. The importance of these kind of units is only increasing in time. And I'll end it with a little treat for you, my friends. Yesterday, Putin held a meeting with religious minorities leaders in Russia. And which one is Putin, which one is the other? You can see Putin right here. Notice how he is sitting alone, nobody on the left or right of him, nobody behind him. There's a huge space between him and the religious leaders. Now this is not just one photo, this illustrates the isolation of the Russian dictator. This is how he is with his thought process, with his orders, with his thoughts, with his understanding of the war in Ukraine and understanding of economic situation in Russia. He is isolated. He is afraid, he's paranoid, and he doesn't trust anybody. Now, my friends, since I am losing my voice for some reason, I'm going to thank the Patreons, and this time I'm going to butcher their names with my Estonian pronunciation and my screwed up voice. Let's go. Alex. Oh, an easy one, thank you. Poppy. Thank you, Poppy. Kalve Jakub. Appreciate you. Benjamin. Mark Stork. Thank you to these 5 people. If you like my channel, Patreon link is in the description below. Become a tier 10 and above and you'll hear your name said in a way you've never heard before. Until my next video, my friends, which will be tomorrow, Slava Ukraini, and bye bye.